We just received a whole load of new information about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and some of that information is about the game's locations. We now know exactly where the game is going to end. Okay folks, so welcome back to the channel where we talk about all things Final Fantasy. We play Final Fantasy. If you like Final Fantasy, then please do stick around and subscribe. So yes, we've just received more information about Rebirth, which we also now know the release date of, February 29th next year, and by the time the game finally hits the shelves, it will have been almost exactly 4 years since the release of FF7 Remake, just to make you feel old. But on the Sony PlayStation blog, there has been a new article released giving us some more details about the game, including where the game is going to end, leading into part 3, and that's what I want to focus on in this video. So ever since the game was announced to be over 3 parts, many of you called exactly where the second game was going to finish, and big clap, you called it correctly. And so without any further ado, I will tell you now, and then we will read the article, that the events of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will culminate at the Forgotten City. And before we go any further, let me just say there are going to be some pretty big spoilers now in this video in terms of Final Fantasy VII Remake Rebirth. You've been warned. So of course, in the original FF7, the Forgotten City, or the Forgotten Capital as it's sometimes called, was a huge moment in the game that changed pretty much the rest of the game from that point on. This is the time where Aerith, still not used to that, was praying in order to call Holy, to summon Holy, a powerful magic in order to destroy Sephiroth and hopefully save the planet. But as she was doing so, Sephiroth himself came and ended her life with his Masamune blade, or as I call it, Mr. Stabby. And this is pretty much the moment in not just the game, but in gaming, that has stuck with many of us over the years. But in terms of the original game, it is really the death of Aerith that determines the entire third act, because that is what helps to motivate the party to complete Aerith's mission in defeating Sephiroth and saving the world. So whether the events in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will play out the same way in the Forgotten City, we still don't know, and there's a lot of discussion online as to whether Aerith is going to die in this game, or if something is going to happen so that the story will change, in the same way that we now know that Zack is alive. Of course, in the original, he was not. Is the same going to be said for Aerith? We'll talk about that a little bit later. First of all, let's just read the article, or at least the last bit of the article, which is where this snippet of information comes from. So, Tetsuya Nomura was asked, FF7 Remake showed the story up until the escape from Midgar. Let me just move that. But at what point does Final Fantasy VII Rebirth take us up to? So Nomura answers right down here, although there are some changes in the order of the locations depicted in this title extend up to the Forgotten Capital, where the greatest fate of Final Fantasy VII awaits you. Bit cryptic there. Obviously, he's not going into the details, but he does confirm that the Forgotten Capital, the Forgotten City, is the conclusion of Rebirth. Again, it was the obvious choice, and many of you did call it. Congratulations, you were correct. So we can almost know with certainty now that something important is going to happen in the Forgotten City. I mean, we all knew that anyway, regardless of where you fall on the discussion as to whether Aerith is going to die or survive, it was still going to be a big moment in the upcoming game. But do you think she should still die as she did in the original, or do you trust Square to rewrite that part of the game in order to have her survive in a way that is satisfactory? For me personally, this is one of those fixed points in time, as Doctor Who may say. It's something that should not be changed or adjusted at all. Aerith's death was such an iconic moment in gaming history that I do not think Square should be messing with that. In fact, so much of my love, and I'm sure this is true for some of you as well, so much of my love and memories and nostalgia that are tied up in Final Fantasy VII are because of that moment and the impact that it had upon me. Now, of course, it's Square's game. They can do what they want. They're not going to get any hate from me. I'm too old for all that. But I would be surprised surprised if keeping Aerith alive was the narrative choice that they go with, not only because of all the nostalgia that's tied up in the original game, but also just from a narrative perspective. Because her death is so pivotal to the rest of the experience, it would mean that the third part of the trilogy would be so radically changed that would it still be accepted by many Final Fantasy VII fans? I'm sure these are questions that Square have been asking, so it will be interesting to see how, their decision, whatever it is, plays out when we do get to play the game next year. But folks, as always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. There's a few other things in this article I do want to talk about, so I will probably make further videos on those. But please do consider subscribing to the channel if you want to be notified of my Final Fantasy content going forward. I love all things Final Fantasy, and more importantly than that, I love discussing it with the awesome community we have here. So thank you so much for being a part of it. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.